Welcome. Find a comfortable position, let your eyes gently close, and settle in. Tonight we're visiting a small, quiet village in a cold medieval winter, where the days are slow, the snow falls softly, and nothing much happens at all. Somewhere in the valley, the evening had already settled in, soft and heavy, the way evenings do in the deep of early winter, when the light goes without much ceremony and the cold simply takes its place. The village was small, as villages in those days tended to be, just a gathering of low stone walls and thatched rooftops, each roof dusted with a thin layer of snow that had fallen in the afternoon and then stopped quietly, without any fuss. The oak trees at the edge of the frozen field stood bare and still, their branches dark against a sky the color of pewter, and the whole valley seemed to have drawn a long, slow breath and held it, the way cold places do when the wind has gone away. Inside the houses, candles had been lit, small flames behind squares of oiled cloth, warm and amber, steady. And in one of these houses, near the center of the village, a man named Aldrich sat beside his hearth. He was about 40 years of age, with a stocky, settled kind of build, the sort of man who moved slowly and deliberately, who carried his weight comfortably, who had no particular reason to hurry. His hair was brown with gray beginning to move through it, and he wore a tunic of heavy, undyed wool that had been washed so many times it had grown soft and shapeless in a pleasant way, the kind of wool that holds warmth without effort. On the floor beside him, open and leaning against the leg of his stool, sat a worn leather satchel, and from it he had been drawing out small bundles of dried herbs, one by one, and laying them across his knee. This was a thing he did most evenings in winter, when there was nothing pressing to be done and the fire gave enough light to work by. He would take a bundle in his hands and hold it gently, turning it, feeling the dry crumble of the leaves between his fingers, smelling the faint, dusty sweetness that rose from them. There was yarrow, tied with a bit of rough twine, and some bundles of dried chamomile, their small, pale heads still holding their shape. There were roots he had gathered in autumn and left to dry in the rafters, and which he had brought down that afternoon to sort through. He laid them out along the edge of the hearthstone, where the warmth would keep his hands from stiffening. The fire made a low sound, a settling sound, embers shifting under the weight of a new log he had placed there some time ago. Frost was beginning to trace its quiet patterns along the lower edge of the window cloth, delicate and slow, the way frost always comes, without announcement. Aldrich looked at it for a moment, then looked back at the herbs in his hands and continued sorting. And so the evening continued, as evenings in the valley often did, quietly and without hurry, one soft moment dissolving into the next, like snow falling into still water. Aldrich had moved the herbs to their shelf, each small bundle resting in its place, and now he sat again at the low table by the hearth, where a tallow candle burned with a steady, unhurried flame, its light the color of warm honey against the pale stone wall. He had opened the old ledger book, the one with the cracked spine, and the cover darkened by years of careful hands, and he had set it flat before him on the table, smoothing the page with the heel of his palm the way he always did, slowly, once and then again, feeling the slight roughness of the parchment beneath his skin. Outside, beyond the oiled cloth of the window, the snow continued to fall. It had been falling for some time now, gently and without wind, each flake settling onto the thatched rooftops and the frozen earth and the bare branches of the oak trees at the edge of the field, adding to the soft, white silence that lay over everything. Aldrich watched a single flake drift past the amber glow of the window and disappear into the dark beyond. Then he looked back down at the ledger. The tallies were simple things, marks and numbers recording the grain that had been counted and stored before the cold came properly, the sacks of rye in the low stone storehouse, the smaller portion of barley, the jars of dried peas sealed with wax. He dipped the quill into the ink and began to copy the figures from a loose slip of rough paper onto the clean column of the ledger. Each number formed with slow, deliberate care, the scratching of the quill a small and comfortable sound in the quiet room. Outside, a few more flakes drifted past. The candle flame leaned slightly and then straightened again. Aldrich paused to let the ink dry, resting his chin in his hand and watching the page without any particular thought, his eyes soft and unfocused, the way a man's eyes become when the day has been long and the fire is warm and there is nothing more urgent than the slow forming of a number on a page. He could hear the embers settling in the hearth behind him, a low and familiar sound, like something exhaling. The weight of his wool tunic was heavy across his shoulders in the comfortable way that warm cloth always is on a cold evening, and the smell of the herbs still lingered faintly in the room, lavender and dried thyme and something earthier beneath. The smell of the stone walls and the old wood and the particular stillness of a house in winter. He wrote another number. Outside, the snow fell and fell. And so, after a long while, Aldrich set down his quill. He did not set it down with any particular intention or ceremony. It simply came to rest against the edge of the small clay ink pot, the way things tend to come to rest when the hand that holds them has grown too heavy with the lateness of the hour. The scratch of writing had stopped, and the room filled again with the quieter sounds that had always been there beneath it. The low, steady breathing of the fire in the hearth, the occasional soft settling of an ember, the faint and patient tapping of snow against the oiled cloth of the window. Aldrich sat for a moment, his hands flat on the rough surface of the table, feeling the grain of the wood beneath his palms. The tallies could wait until morning. They would be there, exactly as he had left them, in the same order, the same neat rows, meaning the same simple things they had always meant. There was no hurry. There was only the fire and the candle and the cold outside that pressed softly against the walls of the little stone house without ever quite getting in. He folded the piece of parchment slowly and set it beside the ink pot. And then he rose from his stool, and the stool made a low, familiar sound against the packed earth floor as it shifted. He picked up the candle in its little dish of tallow and carried it with him toward the sleeping corner of the room, where the low wooden bed frame waited beneath a pile of heavy woolen blankets. The blankets were thick and undyed, a deep, natural gray, and they had been on that bed for a very long time, and they smelled of wool and wood smoke and the particular quiet that settles over old things. Aldrich sat on the edge of the bed and pulled off his heavy boots one at a time, setting each one carefully on the earthen floor. He still wore his thick wool tunic, which was warm enough on its own against the chill that crept in from the stones at night. He set the leather satchel of herb bundles down beside the boots, and the dry herbs gave off a faint, dusty sweetness as they settled. He lay back slowly, pulling the heavy blankets up over himself, and the weight of them was a comfort, the way weight often is when the body has decided it is finished with the day. The candle still burned on the small shelf nearby. He watched it for a while, or perhaps he only thought he was watching it. The flame was very still. The snow tapped once against the window, and then again, and then not at all. The fire breathed quietly in the hearth. The blankets were warm and very heavy. The dark was soft. Good night, Aldrich. Good night.